Good morning, friends, and welcome to the Avenue Uniting Church in Blackburn, Victoria. My name's Rod Peppiatt. I'm the minister here, and in just a little while the congregation will gather for Sunday morning worship here on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples. And we will hear together two readings, one ancient, one quite contemporary. The ancient one comes from the book of Proverbs, and it relates to the fact that we are sitting within what is often known as the season of creation. From the book of Proverbs, chapter 8. Does not wisdom call, and does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights, beside the way, at the crossroads she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries out, "To you, O people, I call, and my cry is to all that live. Simple ones, learn prudence. Acquire intelligence, you who lack it. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to one who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her." Then a very simple contemporary reading of grace from Norman Harble called "Be Still." Be still and feel the presence of God, the presence pulsing through earth. Be still and feel the pulse of God. Be still and hear the Spirit of God, the Spirit breathing through earth. Be still and hear the breath of God. Be still. Behold the glory of God, the glory filling this earth. Be still. Behold the face of God. Does not wisdom call, and does not understanding raise her voice? They ask in Proverbs chapter 8:1. Wisdom needs a big W. Not the one in the shopping centre, but wisdom. I'm talking about wisdom in the context of our Old Testament, and especially in this reading from Proverbs. And I think it needs a big, as in capital, W. Why is that? Well, it's to remind us that in much of our faith inheritance, wisdom is a great deal more than simply being wise, as important as that is. It is that, but it's more too. In our traditions, wisdom is a driving force in the creation of the entire cosmos and in its continuing life. In other words, wisdom is the creative energy, the creative spirit in the world. That deserves a big W. Or it could be a big S for Sophia. That's the name given to the wisdom traditions in the Hebrew Scriptures, especially in the Hebrew language. It's a feminine name a feminine energy. And it speaks from within the people's traditions and experience of birth, of creative power, of renewing life, and the intimate connection between creator and created. I think we lost much that was precious in our heritage, in a way, when the Sophia traditions within Judaism were overtaken by the influence of Greek philosophy in early Christianity. And with that influence came a new distinction and a distance between earthly and heavenly. And many of you who have heard me speak before know that I believe that's a false distinction. The imagery we see in our passage from Proverbs 8 and elsewhere is poetic and it's magnificent. And in it, we get a sense of how the people understood and experienced the Sophia, the wisdom traditions, to be at the centre of who they were as a people of God. And those connections, those relationships that in many ways have been lost or ignored in Western Christianity over the last 500-600 years, are real, deep and raw. And without them, we've somehow managed to see the rest of creation as separate from us, perhaps even from God. And as such, they become fine to be used as we see fit. Drill, baby, drill, and all the rest of it. But as Proverbs 8 continues, we see such statements as, "Ages ago I was set up, at the first, before the beginning of the earth. Or when there were no depths, I was brought forward. When God made firm the skies above, I was there. So when we drew a circle on the face of the deep." Now, we do well to remember that this is poetry rather than a documentary account of wisdom. And to hear it that way, so that we hear the power of it. Wisdom was there, I've always been there. We see in verses 30 and 31 these words, "Then I was beside him like a master worker, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the human race." Other proverbs go even further in declaring wisdom as the energy through which the universe, the cosmos itself, came into being. Proverbs 3, for instance, sings of wisdom as the partner, the power, the guiding principle within creation. Now, I'm not a biblical literalist. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my words. I believe that creation took much longer than 7 Earth days. I believe that our planet is much older than 6,000 years, and that creation is an ongoing process rather than a one-off event. So I read these proverbs as poetry and image and wonderful story, way too big to be contained or restrained by mere facts, and way bigger than arguments about how historically accurate they are or not. I read them in that way because that's how they were written. And when I do so, I sense the wisdom of God come alive all over again in a way that our world desperately needs to hear. Wisdom is calling us to pay attention to the energy and passion that spoke and speaks creation into being. Calling us to pay attention to the fact that creation isn't other, it is us. Calling us as people of sacrament to honour and remember and practice the sacrament which came before all others, creation. Calling us as people of faith to hear the cries of the planet as the cry of the Creator. I said earlier that wisdom is more than simply being wise, more than simply understanding, and I stand by that. But at the same time, I don't want us to ignore being wise and understanding in the way we normally use those words. I think that's desperately needed as well, and I think the two are linked. It's wisdom that pays attention to what's happening around us and which is willing to hear, even when hearing is uncomfortable. It's understanding that recognises a need to change course for the sake of others and for ourselves. It's understanding that discovers and recognises our biases and blind spots and has the courage to go beyond them. It's the kind of wisdom that kind of got people speaking a few years ago when a young Swedish woman was using her language, her wisdom to inspire anyone that will listen. Now, I don't know whether Greta Thunberg identifies as a person of faith, but when I heard her and when I listen for others like her, I hear something that sounds awfully like wisdom, with a really big W. As I do when I hear great Christian scholars like Matthew Fox say crazy, wonderful things like, there are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on the earth. How can that not make us wonder? Or this, when Jesus says, love your neighbour, do we really think it only means the two-legged ones next door? Is not the air our neighbour? The water? The earth itself? Or this, if we've forgotten the sacredness of water, try going without it for 3 days. Wisdom is crying out. I don't believe that's in question. Understanding is raising her voice. On the heights, beside the way, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Besides the gates, in front of the town, at the entrance to the portals, she cries out, to you, O people, I call, and my cry is to all that live. Wisdom is crying out. What I believe is in question is this: who's listening? Amen.